and he never arrived without a reason. She invited him in, and as he stepped into the warm living room, the air between them felt heavier than usual, filled with words that had not yet been spoken. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch instead of leaning back, his hands folded together, his foot tapping lightly, and Laura noticed small things she usually ignored, like how his jaw tightened when he was nervous, or how he avoided looking directly at her at first. She asked him how school was going, how work was treating him, keeping her tone light, but Ethan answered briefly, clearly distracted, and soon the polite talk faded into silence. Laura had lived long enough to understand that silence often carried more truth than words, and as the clock ticked on the wall, she sensed that whatever Ethan had come to say was not simple. Finally, he lifted his head and looked at her fully, and in that moment she did not see her nephew as a boy anymore, but as a young man carrying a serious concern. He told her he had been thinking about her a lot lately, about how she always said she was fine, but never sounded convinced, about how she worked late even when she did not need to, about how she avoided talking about the future, as if it were closed road. His voice was calm but firm, and each sentence landed gently yet deeply, catching Laura off guard, because she was not used to being seen so clearly. She tried to laugh it off, to tell him that life was busy and quiet was normal, but Ethan did not smile back. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes full of care, and said he was worried she was slowly disappearing into her routines. Laura felt something shift inside her, a mix of surprise and vulnerability, because she had always believed she hid her loneliness well, believing it was kinder not to burden others with it. Ethan spoke faster now, not rushing but moving with purpose, explaining that after losing his father, he had learned how silence could hide pain, and he did not want the same thing happening to her. Laura listened, unable to interrupt, because his words were not accusing, only honest, and honesty has a way of breaking down walls. She realized that Ethan had watched her more closely than she thought, noticing how she lingered at the window in the evenings, how she filled her weekends with tasks instead of people, how she smiled quickly and changed the subject when anyone mentioned love. The house felt smaller as his words echoed through it, and Laura suddenly felt exposed, like a quiet truth had been spoken aloud for the first time. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she had chosen this life after heartbreak taught her to be careful, but the defense felt weak even in her own mind. Ethan ended his thoughts with a simple statement, saying that she deserved more than a life built only on responsibility and memory, and then he fell silent, waiting. Laura sat there, heart racing, realizing that this conversation was not just about concern, but about something she had avoided facing for years. She looked at Ethan and saw love, not judgment, and that made it harder to hide. The room held its breath as Laura searched for the right words, knowing that whatever she said next might change more than just the mood of the evening, and in that stillness, she understood that the knock at the door had not been an accident, it was the beginning of something she could no longer ignore. Ethan did not wait long after Laura's silence, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer but more certain, as if he understood that truth needed calm to be heard, and he told her that worrying about her had not come suddenly, but had grown over time, piece by piece, during missed dinners, short phone calls, and holidays where she smiled but seemed far away. Laura tried to respond with humor, saying she was just tired and busy like everyone else, but Ethan gently shook his head and said tired people rest while lonely people hide, and that sentence struck her deeper than she expected. He explained that he had watched her carry everyone else's needs for years without ever setting her own down, that she had become the strong one by habit, not by choice, and strength had slowly turned into distance. Laura felt exposed, yet she could not deny his words because they fit too well, and she remembered evenings when she chose extra work over invitations, mornings when she woke up with no one to text, and moments when she told herself this quiet life was enough. Ethan spoke faster now, not rushing but flowing, saying that after losing his father he learned how silence can look peaceful while hiding pain underneath, and he feared Laura was doing the same, building a calm surface while something inside her waited to be noticed. Laura felt her chest tighten as old memories surfaced, memories of loving deeply and losing slowly, of trusting someone with her heart, and then watching that future fade, and she realized she had never truly healed, only adjusted. She told Ethan she had chosen this life because it felt safe, because hoping again felt risky, but even as she said it, the words sounded rehearsed, like a story she had been telling herself for too long. Ethan listened without interrupting, his eyes steady, and when she finished he said safety should not feel empty, and that love, even when it ends, does not mean it was a mistake. Laura stood and walked toward the window, needing space to breathe, and as she looked outside she saw her reflection in the glass, older but still familiar, and she wondered when she had stopped believing her story could still change. Ethan followed her slowly and said he was not trying to push her into anything, only asking her to be honest with herself, because life had taught him that time does not wait for people to feel ready. His words were not dramatic, just real, and that made them harder to ignore. Laura felt tears rise, but she held them back, not wanting to turn the moment into something heavy, yet the weight was already there, sitting quietly between them. She admitted that some nights felt longer than they should, that she missed being known by someone, that she sometimes wondered what her life might have looked like if she had been braver with her heart. Ethan nodded, as if this was the answer he had been waiting for, and told her that missing love did not make her weak, it made her human. The room felt warmer then, less tense, as if something hidden had finally been named, and Laura realized how rare it was to be understood without having to explain every detail. Ethan said he did not want her to wake up one day realizing she had spent years protecting herself from a future that might have been kinder than she imagined, and those words stayed with her, echoing softly. Laura sat back down, feeling tired in a new way, the kind that comes after honesty, and she understood that this conversation was not about fixing her life, but about opening it. She thanked Ethan for caring enough to speak up, and he smiled, relieved, telling her he only said what love made him say. As the evening moved forward, the house no longer felt silent but thoughtful, filled with unspoken possibilities, and Laura sensed that something inside her had shifted, not dramatically, but enough to matter. She did not know what would come next, but she knew she could no longer pretend she wanted nothing more, because in that quiet living room, with her nephew's concerns still hanging in the air, she finally admitted to herself that her heart was not finished hoping. Ethan hesitated after Laura's last words, as if weighing whether to cross a line that could not be uncrossed, and the pause itself made Laura uneasy because she sensed there was more he had not yet said. He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out his phone, holding it with both hands like something fragile, and when he placed it on the table and turned the screen toward her, Laura's breath caught before she even read the message fully. The name alone stirred a rush of memory, bringing back years she had carefully folded away, and for a moment the room felt unsteady, as if the past had quietly stepped inside without knocking. Ethan explained that he had run into Mark at a local fundraiser, that the meeting had been unexpected and brief, but meaningful, and that Mark had asked about Laura in a way that sounded careful, not casual. Laura felt her heart race, surprised not only by the news, but by how quickly emotions returned, sharp and clear, reminding her that time had not erased everything as she once believed. She tried to steady herself, telling Ethan that Mark was part of another chapter, a closed one, but the words felt thin, lacking the confidence she wanted them to carry. Ethan spoke again, faster now, saying Mark had changed, that he carried regret without bitterness, and that he seemed unsure whether reaching out would be welcome or painful. Laura stood and walked away from the table, needing space, her thoughts moving quickly between memory and fear, because the idea of seeing Mark again felt both comforting and terrifying. She remembered the way they once spoke about the future, as if it were guaranteed, how life slowly pulled them in different directions, and how letting go had hurt more than she ever admitted. Ethan followed her with his eyes but stayed where he was, respecting the moment, and said he had not planned to get involved but felt it was wrong to keep something that important from her. Laura appreciated his honesty, yet part of her wanted to retreat, to protect the calm she had built even if it felt incomplete. She admitted she was afraid, not of Mark himself, but of reopening feelings she had worked so hard to quiet, because hope had once cost her dearly. Ethan listened closely and replied that fear was not a reason to close every door, and that avoiding pain sometimes meant avoiding joy as well. His words were steady, not persuasive, and that made them more powerful, because he was not pushing for a reunion, only for honesty. Laura sat down slowly, feeling the weight of the moment, and she realized that Mark's return was not a coincidence, but a test of everything they had just discussed. She asked Ethan what he had said to Mark, and when he admitted he told him maybe it was okay to reach out, Laura felt a mix of surprise and gratitude, because someone else had believed in her heart when she no longer did. She covered her face briefly, overwhelmed, then laughed softly at herself, realizing how much control she had tried to maintain over something that was never fully in her hands. Ethan reminded her she did not have to decide anything now, that the message did not demand action, only thought, and that sometimes knowing someone still cared was enough to change how a person saw their own future. Laura nodded, breathing more evenly, and for the first time, she did not push the thought of Mark away, but allowed it to sit quietly in her mind. The room felt different then, filled with possibility instead of tension, and Laura understood that this moment was less about the past returning and more about the present opening up. She thanked Ethan again, her voice steady but sincere, and he smiled, relieved, as if he had carried this secret longer than he admitted. As the evening ended and Ethan prepared to leave, Laura stood alone in the living room, holding her phone, staring at the message she had not yet opened, knowing that whatever she chose next would shape more than just her night. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the quiet shift happening inside her, and Laura realized that love, even when buried, never truly disappears. It waits, patient and unchanged, until someone finds the courage to look at it again. Laura did not plan to leave the house that morning, yet she found herself awake early, dressed without thinking, standing at the door with her keys in hand as if some quiet force was guiding her forward, and she realized that avoiding the moment would only stretch the uncertainty longer. The air outside felt crisp and honest, and as she drove through familiar streets, memories surfaced, but did not overwhelm her. Instead, they moved beside her like old companions. She parked near the small cafe downtown, the same one she and Mark once visited years ago, and for a brief second she considered turning back, but something stronger than fear pushed her onward. When she stepped inside, the sound of soft music and low voices filled the space, and then she saw him sitting near the window, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, looking older yet calmer, and when their eyes met, time seemed to pause without becoming heavy. Mark stood, unsure whether to smile or speak first, and Laura noticed the careful distance in his posture, the respect in his hesitation, which eased her nerves more than words could. They greeted each other simply, no dramatic reactions, just quiet acknowledgement of shared history, and as they sat down, Laura felt her heart beat slow, realizing she was not breaking apart, as she once feared. Conversation came easily, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. They spoke about work, about changes, about lessons learned through loss and patience, avoiding the past at first but never denying it. Mark admitted that leaving years ago had been harder than he let on, that life had taught him humility and clarity, and that seeing Laura's name again had stirred feelings he thought time had settled. Laura listened closely, surprised by how calm she felt, and when she spoke, she did not accuse or defend. She simply shared how she had grown careful with her heart, how silence had become familiar, and how she once believed moving on meant closing every door behind her. There were pauses between their words, but they felt natural, like space allowing truth to breathe, and Laura realized she was not chasing an old dream, but standing in a new moment shaped by experience. Mark told her he did not come seeking promises, only honesty, and that alone softened something deep inside her. As sunlight shifted across the cafe floor, Laura felt a quiet warmth she had not felt in years, not excitement, not certainty, but hope grounded in reality. She understood then that love did not have to rush to be real, and that beginning again did not erase the past but learned from it. When they stood to leave, Mark asked if they could meet again, not tomorrow, not urgently, just when it felt right, and Laura surprised herself by saying yes without hesitation. Later that evening, when Laura returned home, the house felt different, not fuller, but lighter, and when Ethan called to check on her, she told him about the cafe, about the calm conversation, about how nothing was decided yet everything felt possible. Ethan laughed softly, relieved, and said he only wanted her to choose a life that felt true, and Laura thanked him, realizing how much courage his concern had given her. That night, Laura sat by the window she once stared through in silence, but now her thoughts were steady, her heart open but unguarded, and she accepted that love might return not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet presence built on understanding. She did not know where the path would lead, and she no longer needed to know, because for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to walk forward without fear, trusting that whatever came next would be shaped by choice, honesty, and the simple belief that her story was still unfolding.